You won't believe what happened during a simple family celebration. What started as a perfect day turned into a nightmare that no one could escape. But the real horror only began later. And it will shock you. Watch the video until the end to uncover the dark truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world to us. The house buzzed with excitement. Balloons floated against the ceiling, colorful ribbons danced in the air, and the scent of vanilla and chocolate wafted from the kitchen. Today was special, Alex and Luca's 12th birthday. Evelina pushed through the crowd of family and friends, holding a large box tied with golden ribbons. Her face glowed with happiness. "The cake is here," she announced cheerfully, and all heads turned toward her. The boys' eyes widened with delight when they saw the cake. On top stood carefully crafted figurines of their favorite Avengers characters, each one meticulously detailed, ready to save the world just like their heroes. Alex and Luca rushed forward, their faces lit up with pure joy. Their grandmother, Celeste, smiled warmly and stepped forward to light 12 candles on the cake, one for each precious year. The soft glow filled the dimmed room with a tender light. Henry, their father, turned off the main lights, plunging the room into a cozy darkness. The guests began singing "Happy Birthday," their voices mingling into a heartfelt chorus that filled the space with love. Evelina stood by the table, hands clasped together, watching her sons' faces beam as they soaked in the attention. Her heart felt full to bursting. When the song ended, the boys closed their eyes tightly, made a wish, and blew out the candles together. Applause erupted around the room. Everything seemed perfect. Evelina placed the first slice of cake onto a plate and handed it to Alex. Luca waited eagerly for his. Piece by piece, the cake was served, laughter filling the room as everyone dug into the sugary treat. Minutes passed, sweet, perfect minutes that Evelina would replay endlessly in her mind. Then Alex clutched his chest. At first, Evelina thought he was pretending, playing some childish prank. But when he gasped out, "Mom, I don't feel good," and his face twisted in pain, she realized something was terribly wrong. He collapsed onto the floor, knocking over his plate. "Luca, help him!" Evelina cried out, panic rising in her throat. Luca rushed forward but barely made it a few steps before he too staggered, grabbing onto a chair for support. His legs gave out, and he fell beside his brother, gasping for air. The world seemed to freeze. Evelina ran to them, her heart hammering against her ribs. She dropped to her knees, reaching for Alex's hand, and then it hit her, a sudden, searing pain in her chest. The room spun wildly. She could hear voices, distant and distorted, like echoes underwater. Someone screamed. Chairs scraped across the floor. Feet pounded as guests rushed in all directions. Then there was only darkness. When Evelina opened her eyes again, she was staring at the ceiling. Strangers loomed over her, their faces tight with urgency. She saw flashing red and blue lights outside the windows. Someone was shouting, "Clear! Clear!" as medics tried to revive them, but it was too late. The paramedics looked grim when they stepped back. One of them shook his head. No pulse. Time of death, 12 minutes past 7. They covered Alex, Luca, and Evelina with white sheets. The room was eerily silent now. The scent of smoke from extinguished candles hung heavy in the air, mixing with the sharp tang of fear. The tragedy was recorded as an unfortunate accident. The police found no signs of foul play, no injuries, no marks. The autopsy reported sudden cardiac arrest. 3 lives gone in an instant without warning. No one had answers. The next day, preparations were made for the funeral. Celeste insisted that there be only one coffin. The idea of separating Evelina from her sons was unbearable. "They lived together, they leave together," she said softly, tears glistening in her eyes. The funeral director hesitated but agreed to commission a special, large casket crafted with polished mahogany and lined with the finest velvet. A single, beautiful casket to hold all three of them. The funeral was set on a gloomy afternoon. The sky was a sheet of dull gray, and a cold wind whipped through the cemetery, rattling the leafless trees. Friends and relatives gathered, wearing black, their faces pale and grim. Celeste stood near the grave, a white handkerchief clutched tightly in her fist. Her face was a mask of grief, but her eyes burned with something else, something darker, something steely. As the casket was lowered into the ground, she stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. She placed a single white flower on the lid and whispered, "You are together, always." The priest spoke solemn words about love, loss, and eternal peace, but they sounded hollow to Celeste. She knew that this wasn't the end. Far from it. The guests began to leave, whispering condolences, offering fleeting hugs and empty reassurances. Celeste remained behind, staring at the mound of freshly turned earth. She stayed until the last shovel of dirt was thrown, until the last mourner was gone, until darkness fell. Late that night, Carlos, the cemetery's night watchman, sat in his tiny shack, sipping lukewarm coffee and flipping through a tattered magazine. Rain tapped against the windows, and a low fog crept between the gravestones. It was just another quiet shift, or so he thought. From somewhere deep in the cemetery, he heard a faint, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. He stiffened. It was too late for mourners, too wet for kids playing pranks. Tap, tap. Carlos rose slowly from his chair, peering out into the mist. He saw nothing. Just endless rows of graves and monuments swallowed by fog. Shrugging it off, he sat back down and turned up the radio. Below the earth, sealed in darkness, Evelina's fingers twitched. Her lungs burned for air. Panic exploded in her chest. She clawed blindly at the coffin lid before her hand brushed against something. Smooth, plastic, hard. A phone. She pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, casting a dim, ghostly glow. A single message popped up. "Put on the mask. Breathe. We're coming for you." Her heart racing, Evelina fumbled around, finding a hidden compartment. Inside were 3 oxygen masks connected to small canisters. Hands shaking, she fitted the masks onto Alex and Luca, then her own face. The oxygen hissed into her lungs, reviving her senses. She clutched her sons to her, whispering reassurances, even as terror gnawed at her insides. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then, muffled sounds, shovels digging, thuds above them. The coffin shook. A sudden burst of light seared her eyes as the lid was wrenched open. 3 figures in black loomed over them, faces hidden behind masks. No words of comfort, no kindness, just a single, chilling order. "Stay silent and do exactly what we say, or you go back in." Evelina, too weak and terrified to resist, nodded. Clutching her trembling sons, she let them pull her out into the rain-drenched night. They were herded into a black van without license plates. The door slammed shut behind them. As the van pulled away, the cemetery disappeared into the fog. Inside the van, silence pressed down like a heavy hand. No explanations, no promises, only fear. And in Evelina's heart, a spark of desperate hope. She was alive. But what awaited them next was a mystery darker than the grave they had just escaped. The rain had soaked through Evelina's thin dress, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably as the van bumped along a dirt road. The inside was pitch black, with only the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the hard faces of the masked men sitting opposite them. Alex and Luca huddled against her sides, silent, their small bodies trembling with fear. Evelina's mind raced. Who were these people? What did they want? Why were they helping them? Or were they? The van jolted violently, and Luca whimpered. Evelina pulled him closer, whispering soothing words, though her own heart pounded painfully in her chest. No one spoke. Minutes turned into an eternity. Finally, the van screeched to a stop. One of the masked men opened the back doors, and cold night air flooded in. "Out," the leader barked. Evelina helped her sons climb down. Their feet sank into mud as they stumbled into a clearing surrounded by dense, towering trees. Ahead loomed an old, decaying mansion, its windows dark and empty, the roof sagging under years of neglect. The sight of it sent a fresh wave of dread through Evelina. "This way," ordered the man. They were herded up crumbling stone steps and through a heavy wooden door that groaned on its hinges. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of mildew. The hallway was narrow, lined with faded wallpaper peeling off in strips. Evelina clutched Alex's and Luca's hands tighter. At the end of the hallway was a small room, a bare mattress on the floor, a rickety table, and a single flickering lamp hanging from the ceiling. "Stay here," the man said before turning to leave. The door slammed shut, and Evelina heard the distinct click of a lock. She sank onto the mattress, pulling her sons into her arms. Luca began to cry quietly. Alex tried to be brave, but Evelina felt his body shaking. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, kissing their damp hair. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She tried to sound confident, but her mind screamed otherwise. The door opened again. Evelina sprang to her feet, ready to shield her sons. But it wasn't a masked man who entered. It was her mother. "Mom?" Evelina breathed, disbelief cutting through the haze of fear. Celeste stepped into the room, her face calm, almost serene. She wore a long black coat and carried something in her hands, a phone. "You have to know the truth, Evelina," Celeste said quietly. Evelina stared at her, stunned. Her knees wobbled and she sank back onto the mattress. "What is happening?" she whispered. "Why are you here? Why did you—" Her voice broke. Celeste sat down across from her, setting the phone on the table. "I had to save you," she said. "Had to save you from him." "From who?" Evelina asked, though part of her already knew. Celeste turned on the phone and pressed play. A video filled the screen. It showed Henry, her husband, lounging on a sofa with a young woman Evelina didn't recognize at first. They were laughing, kissing, drinking wine. Their intimacy was unmistakable. Evelina's stomach twisted into a knot. "Now that she's out of the way, everything she had is ours," Henry said, his voice slurred but clear. The woman giggled and clinked her glass against his. Evelina's world shattered into jagged pieces. Her breath hitched and she pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a sob. "I loved him," she whispered, broken. Celeste reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know, child, but he didn't love you. He loved what you had, your home, your family's money, your trust." Tears blurred Evelina's vision. "I couldn't let him win," Celeste said, her voice hardening. "I had to protect you and the boys. I had to stop him before he truly destroyed you." Evelina shook her head, struggling to make sense of it all. "But why? The cake? The funeral?" "I had to make it real," Celeste said, her face somber. "Had to make him believe you were gone. Only then would he let down his guard. Only then could we strike back. Evelina buried her face in her hands, sobs racking her body. Alex and Luca clung to her, confused and terrified. After several minutes, Evelina straightened, wiping her tears. "What do you want from me?" she asked hoarsely. Celeste's eyes glinted with a strange fire. "I want you to make him pay. I want him to know what fear really is. I want him to experience the hell he built for you." Evelina stared at her mother, feeling a cold determination ignite deep inside. Celeste leaned closer. "Are you ready to do that, Evelina? For yourself? For Alex and Luca?" Evelina nodded slowly. "Good," Celeste said, smiling for the first time that night. It wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp, dangerous. "You'll become something he can't escape, something he can't kill." Celeste opened a battered trunk near the wall. Inside were costumes, white dresses, old-fashioned children's clothing, jars of pale makeup. Evelina frowned. "What is all this?" Celeste's smile widened. "A little theater, a little illusion. Fear is more powerful than any weapon." She pulled out a white dress and held it up to Evelina. "You're going to become his nightmare," she said. Evelina touched the fabric, her fingers trembling. Beside her, Alex and Luca watched with wide, uncertain eyes. They had already lost everything. There was nothing left to lose. Only vengeance remained. And so, in the flickering lamplight of that abandoned house, Evelina began to transform. White paint covered her warm skin, making her look like a ghost. Her hair was left unkempt, cascading wildly around her shoulders. Her eyes were darkened with shadow, hollow and deep. Alex and Luca were dressed in crisp white shirts, their small faces powdered to an eerie pallor. They looked at themselves in the cracked mirror and giggled nervously, the sound echoing strangely in the empty room. Celeste supervised every step, making sure every detail was perfect. "No sudden movements," she instructed. "No speaking. Only laughter. Soft, unsettling. Stay in the shadows. Let him question what he sees." They rehearsed walking silently, appearing and disappearing like phantoms. Evelina moved with grace, her body light, almost floating. The boys followed, practicing their steps until even the creaky old floorboards barely groaned under their weight. When they were ready, Celeste stepped back and admired them. "You're perfect," she said. Evelina stared at her reflection, feeling like she no longer recognized herself. She wasn't Evelina, the mother, the wife. She was something else now, something unstoppable. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning splitting the sky into jagged veins of white. Inside, in the heart of the forgotten mansion, Evelina prepared to step into the darkness and take back her life. And Henry, poor, foolish Henry, had no idea that his real nightmare was just beginning. The night was thick with mist as Evelina stood in front of the cracked mirror, adjusting the white dress that hung off her now fragile frame. The pale makeup on her face made her features look hollow, ghost-like. She barely recognized herself, but that was the point. Alex and Luca sat quietly at the foot of the mattress, their small faces powdered to an eerie whiteness, their wide eyes reflecting a nervous excitement. Celeste moved around them with quiet efficiency, checking every detail, her hands steady, her face unreadable. "You must become a shadow," Celeste said, her voice low. "No sudden movements, no words unless absolutely necessary. Fear comes from what is half seen, half understood." They spent hours rehearsing. Evelina learned to glide silently across the floor, her movements slow and deliberate. Alex and Luca practiced slipping past doorways, their laughter soft and haunting. They were careful not to stay in the light for too long, just enough to leave a chilling impression before vanishing again. Celeste showed them how to manipulate reflections, how to use the broken mirrors to their advantage. In the dim light of the abandoned mansion, their rehearsals took on an almost ritualistic air. Evelina found herself sinking deeper into the role, feeling her fear harden into resolve. She no longer trembled when she saw her ghostly reflection. Instead, she welcomed it. She embraced the fear she was about to unleash. When Celeste was finally satisfied, she handed Evelina a small, tattered map. Tonight, they celebrate. They think they are free. You will show them the truth. Evelina folded the map and tucked it into the waistband of her dress. She took her son's hands, squeezing them gently. They were scared, but they nodded bravely. They left the mansion under the cover of darkness, slipping through the woods until the trees gave way to the outskirts of the city. There, perched on a hill, was the grand house that Henry had claimed as his new kingdom. Lights blazed from the windows and laughter spilled out into the night. Inside, Henry and Mariana were celebrating. The house was decorated with gold and white balloons. Champagne flowed freely. They laughed, toasted, and dreamed out loud about the future that was now wide open before them. "They think it's over," Evelina whispered, crouched behind a hedge with Alex and Luca. Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with a grim anticipation. Celeste gave a small nod. Moving like wraiths, Evelina and her sons crept around the house. Alex slipped through a side window. Luca darted into the garden. Evelina positioned herself at the front, her white dress billowing in the cold breeze. Inside, Henry and Mariana discussed buying a villa in Europe, taking a world tour, living without any chains or obligations. They had no idea the chains were already tightening around them. Celeste, waiting by the car, gave Evelina a final look of encouragement. Evelina raised her head, the pale makeup cracking slightly with the movement. She smiled, a thin, merciless smile. It was time. In synchronized silence, they began their haunting. The lights in the house flickered once, then again. Henry frowned and tapped the wall switch. Mariana laughed it off, reaching for another glass of champagne. Alex appeared first, a fleeting shadow in the hallway mirror. Mariana caught the movement and froze. She stared at the mirror, her face draining of color. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Henry shook his head, annoyed. "It's nothing." But when he turned, Evelina stood at the window, watching them. Pale, still, her dark eyes hollow and unblinking. Henry stumbled back, dropping his glass. Shards of crystal scattered across the floor. Who is that?" Mariana screamed. Before Henry could answer, Luca's soft, eerie laughter echoed through the hallway, bouncing off the walls, wrapping around them like a cold fog. Henry grabbed Mariana's arm. "We're seeing things. It's stress." But when the chandelier above them began to sway without reason, when the shadows deepened unnaturally, when the cold breath of something unseen brushed their necks, they knew it was real. Mariana bolted, barefoot, shrieking as she fled into the night, slipping and falling on the wet grass outside. Henry was left alone. Breathing heavily, heart hammering against his ribs, he backed away until he hit the wall. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a rational explanation. And then the doorbell rang. A slow, deliberate knock. Henry, trembling, crept to the door and opened it. Celeste stood there, dressed in black, her face stern. Behind her, in the mist, Evelina stood motionless, her white dress glowing faintly in the moonlight. Henry's knees gave out, and he sank to the floor. "We're not gone," Evelina said, her voice a chilling whisper carried by the wind. "You cannot bury your sins." Behind her, Alex and Luca stood hand in hand, their laughter floating through the night air, high and thin and terrible. Henry tried to scream, but no sound came out. His vision blurred. His body refused to obey him. The house that had been his refuge became his prison, and Evelina, his wife, the woman he had betrayed, was no longer bound by the rules of the living. This was just the beginning. Henry stumbled backward, gasping for breath as the front door slammed shut on its own. He clawed at the handle, but it refused to budge. The lights flickered violently, casting monstrous shadows across the ornate walls of the mansion. The temperature inside dropped rapidly, and his breath became visible in the frigid air. The chandelier above the grand staircase began to sway and then spin as if caught in a ghostly whirlwind. Henry turned and saw Evelina's reflection in the mirror, her hollow eyes fixed on him. He spun around, but she wasn't there. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold. A soft sound of children's laughter echoed through the halls, growing louder and more distorted with every passing second. Henry bolted through the house, slipping on the polished floors, heart thundering in his chest. From the corner of his eye he caught glimpses of Alex and Luca darting from room to room, their white shirts glowing faintly in the darkness, their faces frozen in eternal smiles. Their presence was fleeting, always just out of reach, always just out of sight. Henry reached the grand living room where earlier he had toasted to his new life with Mariana. The champagne glasses lay shattered on the floor, their contents pooling like blood. He tried to call for help, but his voice cracked and failed him. In the mirror above the fireplace, Evelina and the boys appeared again, standing silently behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. The walls seemed to close in around him. Whispers filled his ears, unintelligible at first, then forming words he couldn't bear to hear. "You can't run," they said. "You can't hide." His mind spiraled into panic. He backed into the dining room where the long table was now set for three plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 chairs. His stomach churned violently. From upstairs came a sudden crash. Henry whipped his head toward the staircase just in time to see a figure dart across the landing. It was Luca, his white shirt billowing behind him like a ghostly sail. Henry stumbled backward into the kitchen, knocking over a heavy pot with a deafening clang. The kitchen lights exploded, plunging him into darkness. In the pitch black, Henry heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, approaching. He pressed himself against the wall, desperate to become invisible. The footsteps stopped right in front of him. He could feel a cold breath against his face. The lights flickered back on, and Evelina stood inches away, her face pale and cracked like porcelain, her lips moving silently. Henry screamed and fled through the house, desperate to find an exit, desperate to find Mariana, desperate to find anyone who could save him. But the house had become a labyrinth of nightmares. Every mirror he passed reflected his greatest fears. In one, he saw himself lying lifeless on the floor, blood pooling around his head. In another, he saw Alex and Luca reaching out to him, their eyes black voids. In a third, he saw Evelina smiling sadly as the walls around him crumbled. He stumbled into the basement, thinking to find an escape door, but the stairwell collapsed behind him, trapping him in the damp, claustrophobic darkness. The walls of the basement seemed to breathe, pulsing with a life of their own. He heard Celeste's voice from somewhere above, calm and cold. "You made your choice, Henry. Now live with it." Henry dropped to his knees, sobbing, begging for forgiveness to an audience that would grant him none. The door to the basement creaked open and a soft light spilled in. Henry looked up and saw Evelina standing at the top of the stairs, holding a single candle. "You killed us," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of death. "Now we live in you." The candle blew out, and darkness swallowed him whole. Henry screamed until his throat was raw, but no one came. Above him, the mansion fell silent once more, the night wrapping its cold arms around the broken shell of a man who had once thought himself victorious. The mansion stood silent under the weight of the new day, but inside its walls Henry was trapped in a living nightmare. He huddled in a dark corner of the basement, his mind broken, unable to tell dreams from reality. Every creak of the floorboards above him sounded like approaching footsteps. Every breath of wind against the windows whispered accusations in Evelina's voice. The once grand home felt like a tomb, each room a reminder of what he had lost and what he had done. He tried to board up the mirrors, but somehow, no matter where he looked, he saw their faces staring back at him, pale and patient. Days blurred into nights. Henry stopped turning on the lights. He lived in darkness, afraid of what he might see if he illuminated the house. He covered the windows, taped black cloth over the mirrors, but still he heard the soft laughter of Alex and Luca. Still he saw Evelina's mournful gaze in every shadow. His food rotted untouched on the kitchen counters. His voice grew hoarse from calling for help that never came. Far away from the mansion, Evelina sat in a small, clean house, sunlight streaming through the windows. She wore simple clothes and had a new name, a new identity. Alex and Luca played quietly with wooden toys on the floor, their laughter sweet and real, not the haunted echoes Henry heard. Celeste sat at the table, sorting through papers, new documents, new passports, tickets for a place where Henry would never find them. "You're free now," Celeste said, sliding a thick envelope across the table to Evelina. Evelina picked it up and nodded slowly, her hand steady, her eyes clear. "Thank you," she whispered. Celeste smiled faintly. "He'll never stop looking. He'll never stop being afraid. But you have a future." Outside, the morning sun painted the world in gold and green. Evelina watched her sons playing, their faces alive and happy, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe. Meanwhile, back in the mansion, Henry sat on the cold marble floor of the once glorious entry hall, staring blankly at the boarded-up windows. His mind replayed the birthday party, the candles, the cake, the fall. He mumbled to himself, eyes darting around as if expecting Evelina and the boys to step from the shadows at any moment. At night, the nightmares were worse. He dreamed of the grave, of the damp earth pressing down on him, of fingers scraping at the coffin lid. He dreamed of Evelina standing at the foot of his bed, her white dress stained with dirt, her hand reaching for him. He screamed himself awake, only to find the house filled with the sound of children's laughter once again. And so it went, day after day, night after night. Henry no longer knew where the nightmare ended and the waking world began. He no longer cared. Evelina and her sons had moved on. Henry remained trapped in a prison of his own making, a hollow ghost of the man he once was, forever haunted by the family he had betrayed and lost. The past never truly dies. And for Henry, the nightmare would never end. What would you do if you were in Evelina's place? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching. See you soon.